Hello there. Today is day 13. Clearly I'm feeling cozy, comfy in my Coca-Cola pajamas. Just living up the feelings of, Christmas joy, and nothing quite says Christmas joy like running around in a one-piece flannel jumpsuit that has no traction on it and can cause you to slip and fall down the stairs. Not that I remember doing so when I was 6 or 7 years old. Yeah, these kind of pajamas are really dangerous. I don't know why we continue to still make them, but whatever. It has pockets too down here. So, that's how you get a woman to wear anything, right? It has pockets. Anyway, like I said, December 13th, day 13. We have, including today, 12 days left. Yesterday was our halfway mark. We are almost getting to that point where we won't have too many more of these. And I know some of you are really looking forward to that, which is sad. That's okay. Again, I have, like 8 people maybe who watch this. So, whatever. Day 13's box is kind of fun. All swirly colors. And today is the salted caramel oolong. And I'm pretty sure I just had a polarizing experience there with some people who watch this by saying salted caramel. And we'll get to that. I promise we'll get to that. Today's tea has 1 out of 3 pips on that caffeine meter that David's Tea so helpfully provides us. It will steep at 90 degrees Celsius, 4 to 5 minutes. And as I'm looking in my canister here today, it's actually not nearly as close to the top as some of my other ones. You can actually kind of see down into that. It's pretty low. So this one I might not get a ton of cups out of. Some of the other ones I know I can get a second cup, maybe even a third, depending on how I do things. So let's go ahead and this one definitely does smell like caramel. And what we were looking at here that's causing those smells is oolong tea, caramel bits, and if you're paying attention, I just said it a different way there, sugar crystals, pineapple, carob, which is going to have that chocolatey kind of flavor. Remember, we've talked about that. Chicory root, artificial caramel flavoring, and salts. And I know that I'm making some of you go, oh, because I'm flip-flopping on how I'm pronouncing that word. It's partly intentional and partly non, so, enjoy. This is going to be another dessert tea based on those sweet ingredients in here. So if I end up liking this one, I'll probably end up recommending that you consider tasting it with some cream, maybe a little bit of sugar, maybe a hit of some vanilla flavoring. We'll see. Again, I don't add anything when I'm tasting the teas because I want to taste them for what they are. So you can kind of see what I got going on here, but we'll pop it over to the other camera because I actually did clear this card, and we'll hope that that was enough. All right, shadow from the tripod leg there. So the darker bits of tea are going to be oolong. Oolong and black tea, remember, do all come from the same tea plant that green tea and white tea do. Just different methods of fermentation, oxidization, and all of that. So we got some oolong tea going on here. This is a candied pineapple. I'm a big fan, so I can recognize that immediately. This is gotta be a caramel bit. I can't really squish it. I'm licking it. That's what that weird noise is. Yeah, that's caramel. There's a new one for you. I lick the ingredients. This kind of looks woodsy and rooty potentially. I'm gonna guess that that's actually, I think, based on it's either chicory or carob. I'm going back and forth on that one. Clearly, I have some sugar crystals. Nice big chunks of sugar there. So I'm not sure if I have all the ingredients represented or not, because again, I definitely have chicory or carob. I'm not sure entirely on that one. This is a big chunk kind of tea, so I could probably use my tea ball, but as I've explained, it's just a little easier for me to, at this point, just use the bags. I just dropped a caramel piece onto the floor. So, and my floor is kind of tan color, so that's gone forever. No, I'll just find it later. All right. So as we go ahead and shake this guy over here, I'm trying to decide if I should just go ahead and use all of it. Yeah, I think I'll go ahead and use all of it. It's going to be a really potent tea. If I was trying to split it and get it to about here, it was going to be, it wasn't going to leave me with a really good steep for another cup. So we'll just say it's just one. All right. So as I said, this is going to be another dessert tea. I will say I do personally associate caramel more as a fall flavor than as a winter flavor. But, I know plenty of people who like to have a good caramel around Christmas, or, crunchy toffees, which are caramel in nature. So, who am I to judge, really? And I try not to. It's just not my personal cup of tea, so to speak. My cat came to visit me and then decided he didn't want to. So that was what that noise was. Anyway, today I do plan to talk about caramel and chicory root. So if you guessed those two ingredients as being the ones I would focus on, congratulations. You are either starting to, 1, predict my patterns, 2, think like me, or 3, you just use process of elimination, knowing that I've already talked a little bit about pineapple and carob, and that I don't tend to talk about the artificial flavorings, and sugar seems to be a weird one to talk about, and I haven't been talking really too much in depth about actual tea. Thus, the only ones for me to talk about were caramel and chicory root. So talking about caramel, it does actually have 2 phonetically acceptable pronunciations. And that's a good thing, because I flip-flop, as you've already seen. I don't even try. I just sometimes will say caramel, sometimes I'll say caramel. In part, it actually does depend on who I'm around. I have a good friend from Texas, and he insists that it is caramel, and I'm pretty sure my husband's actually in that group. We don't really eat a lot of caramel, so we don't argue too much about that. I grew up calling it caramel. I know that for a fact, but, I know it is spelled caramel, so... you're just going to have to deal. You just deal with the fact that I pronounce it however my brain decides that it's going to be pronounced when it comes out of my mouth. I won't even know necessarily which way I'm pronouncing it unless I'm listening in for it. So there's that. It is, and you should know this if you've ever had the confection or seen it, it is a medium to dark orangish brown product that you make by heating sugars. That's caramel. It's fairly simple to make. But the most common uses where you see caramel, or easy places to put it, are in puddings, other desserts, bonbon fillings, ice cream topping, custard topping, or custard flavors as its own. There are also variations of caramel that include brittles, pralines, creme brulee, creme caramel, caramel apple, and toffee. Okay. Now, to make a good caramel, you're basically going to take your sugar, you're going to heat it slowly in a pan to 170 degrees Celsius. That's about 340 degrees Fahrenheit for you. And that's what you do. I have seen different theories where you basically heat it and you don't stir it after the initial mixing it around to get all the sugar crystals heated. I've also seen ones where you want to make sure that you're never stopping mixing it. I'm not sure on the practice of it. I don't really bake all that often. I don't think I've actually successfully ever made a caramel in my life. So I can't really tell you much about the methodology on that. I do know that from a molecular level, what's happening when you caramelize the sugars is that the molecules that actually make up that sugar compound end up breaking down, and then they reform in different ways, and in the reforming they actually release different groups of their compound that helps change the color and helps bring about that more iconic taste of the caramel. Because if you've eaten sugar and you've eaten caramel, you know that they do taste very different, and that's because of actually what happens molecularly when you heat the sugar into caramel. So the exact history of caramel, it's kind of interesting because we don't really actually know the precise history of caramel. There are many people who actually will say it's a purely American-made confection, especially because we do know that hard candies existed as early as the 17th century, so it makes sense that along the line someone would have made a caramel. But basically what we really recognize as being the traditional soft caramels that we like to have, I think Brax is one of the companies that makes those, the little cubes. But between 1650 and 1800 in North America, in the United States, someone decided to add fat and milk to the sugar. Again, boiling water and sugar together. And then in so doing, they created a very soft, gooey caramel product, and that's what we tend to refer to as caramel today. However, there are others who do say that it's actually the Arabs who first discovered caramel in a kind of crunchy crystallized form around the year 1000. Now, twistedfood.co.uk notes that early uses of caramel may have actually been in 1900 BCE, and that was with the ancient Persian and Egyptians who used a combination of a warmed honey and oil as an early iteration of sugar waxing, which eventually then was refined to more of a hot caramel and oil that you would then, leave to harden on the body and then rip off, sometimes using strips. Modern sugaring, of course, does not use the strips, but it was all for removal of body hair. And as a naturally hypoallergenic substance, because it's sugar, it's really low risk for people who have sensitive skin. And it supposedly became quite common in the 16th century harems of the Ottoman Empire, because being hairless became a very popular or desired phenomenon, because that silky smooth skin was, seen as exotic or whatever, and then you could oil it up and glisten, I guess, right? Makes me think actually of those workout shirts that say "I don't sweat, I glisten." But why is glistening appealing? You're either wet, sweaty, or oily, and neither of those do I necessarily really want to cuddle with. Or none of those? Yeah, none. All right, so I have measured my water here, and we're going to go ahead and pour that over. No immediate seeping of color, and no, I take that back. There's now actually some nice brown spreading in the cup, and that sounds really awkward and uncomfortable and disgusting, and I regret my word choices there. But now it's kind of progressing to a yellowy color. It's looking lovely over here. Anyway, on a less sweet note, chicory root is a woody perennial herbaceous plant that is related to the dandelion. It usually has bright blue flowers, but it might rarely have pink or white flowers. But we tend to cultivate it nowadays for use with salad leaves, chicons, or the root itself, which you can then bake, grind, and use as a coffee substitute or just a generic food additive. And we got some things to say about that. Chicory also goes by multiple other names. You may know this plant as the blue daisy, the blue dandelion, the blue sailors, blue weed, bunk, coffee weed, cornflower, hendibe, horseweed, ragged sailors, succory, wild bachelor's buttons, and wild endive or endive. So we got lots of things that we actually call this plant, and it can be confusing because there is actually a real cornflower that's not the chicory root, and yet we use that name. There are actually true endives or endives that are not chicory root. They are in the same family, but they are not actually chicory root, so it can get a little confusing when you're looking at what exactly the plant is that we're focusing on here. During the flowering season for chicory, which is from July to October, chicory has a tough, grooved, and hairy stem, so it's going to be pretty durable, and it's about anywhere between 10 to 40 inches tall, so depending on where you live, how long you let the weeds around you grow, or the plants around you, depending on how you view chicory, it can be quite tall or just reasonably tall. As a coffee additive, chicory root is common in the Mediterranean region. Actually, it's common in a lot of places as a coffee additive, but you can also find it in Indian filter coffee and in parts of Southeast Asia, South Africa, and the southern United States. In France, in fact, you can actually get chicory root as a primary ingredient in a blend that is 60% chicory and 40% coffee, and they call that ricoré. I can't pronounce French, but I hope that that's close enough. Chicory root is also widely used in times of economic hardship, and was actually very common as a coffee substitute during the Great Depression, World War II, the East German coffee crisis of 1976 to 79 as part of the drink Mischkaffee, which just translates to mixed coffee. They also used rye and some other grains in there. Or else, my favorite thing when chicory root was used as coffee, specifically as a coffee substitute, was in 1766 when Frederick the Great banned the importation of coffee into Prussia. So they cultivated chicory root and found that chicory root actually has a bit of a coffee flavor to it. And now, outside of using it as a way to get your non-caffeine or non-coffee coffee fix, you can actually prepare it like a parsnip, so like a root vegetable. And in fact, that is one reason why people do cultivate chicory. And when we do cultivate chicory, we break it into 3 types. And within those 3 types, it is common to find multiple varieties of this. So one type is radicchio, which I know from watching Food Network. It's a common ingredient on things like Chopped and on like Cutthroat Kitchen and stuff like that. In part because not a lot of people necessarily use radicchio. But radicchio has red, green, or variegated red leaves. So it depends entirely on how big of a snob you're dealing with, because some people will say that the predominantly white leaf with the red veins is the only true radicchio. But again, there are multiple varieties of radicchio, but they're all chicory root. And the second type is the Belgian endive, Belgian endive, depending on how you want to pronounce that. It is, like I've said, different from true endive, true endive. Again, they're part of the same genus, part of that same plant group, but they are going to be different. They're different species. The Belgian endive has a white leaf and is somewhat bitter in flavor. Apparently, you actually might find it wrapped in kind of a light blue paper to help keep it from being overly photosynthesized, I guess, overly exposed to light. Apparently light is fairly damaging to the Belgian endive, so you want to protect that. Otherwise it can change your flavor profile entirely. And then the third one, which is widely used across Italy, is the Catalogna chicory, or Catalogna, Cataloni, like bologna. I don't know. But it's spelled Catalogna. Again, it's not a tea video if I can't pronounce something, right? But it is also called puntarelle. And again, it's just prominently used in Italy. I didn't quite see what for, but those are your 3 types. Chicory root does actually contain inulin, which is a polysaccharide similar to starch, and it is actually now used as a sweetener to in many products, and it has a sweetening power that is 10% that of sucrose. And sometimes it has been added in that inulin form to yogurt as a prebiotic. So it's got some good stuff for your gut too, apparently. So this tea could actually, aside from, you know, that caramel, could potentially be pretty good for you. Who knows? We'll see. Now, because chicory does have that coffee-like flavor, as I noted, because if it's going to be used as a coffee additive or even a coffee substitute, people who are coffee snobs are not going to take something that's really super distinct from coffee. I did not smell any coffee notes in the coffee, but I will be looking to see if there's any coffee flavor that comes through. And that would be something I would expect, because the bitterness of a coffee type flavor is going to counteract the caramel sweetness and really play together. It's one reason why you can get yourself those caramel mochas and caramel lattes and all those kinds of things, because caramel and coffee do play off of each other really nicely. It actually kind of plays off of that almost burnt sugary flavor that you get in a lot of caramel, because that's really what you're doing with sugar, right? You're getting it to the point where it's just shy of burning, and that plays really well into that bitter, smoked, roasted flavor that comes from our coffee, which I've talked about in a previous video. So we're going to end up seeing what ends up happening there. I think actually I'm pretty good on my steep time here. Popping over to the other camera, I can definitely see this really nice caramel gradient, except for right at the top. It's still that very clear water. And then at the bottom is where I've got all that concentrated gold and then dark brown. I want to call it absolutely that caramel color. So I'm just going to swirl my tea bag as I do. And now my tea has become absolutely this beautiful color of caramel. If I had a caramel that was about this color as a candy, I'd be pretty happy. I would assume that it was going to taste really, really good. All right. bringing that up there. This is a nice clear one. I can see straight to the bottom when I have the right angle on it. Lighting is not super great, but I can see straight to the bottom of my cup, which is nice. The caramel notes are not nearly as prominent from further away. I have to get a little bit closer to smell it. But yeah, it in some ways it actually does smell a little bit like a caramel coffee. Now that I'm super close to it here. I do think it's a pleasant tea. It's got a good caramel flavor to it, without being super overpowering, super sweet, anything like that. Let's see, what was I thinking? Let's go back to what I said earlier, what I expected. I'm not getting any coffee notes, just thinking about what else I was talking about there. I also don't get really any pseudo chocolate notes from the carob. I also don't really get salt, so mostly I just get that this is a caramel tea. I actually really wonder why I didn't have any of these caramel bits in what was supposed to be my caramel shortbread. Do you remember that? That I was supposed to have a shortbread one that had caramel notes to it, because I described it as potentially being millionaire shortbread. Without that baked cookie kind of taste, this tastes more like I would expect a caramel shortbread to taste, because I get caramel. Yeah, it's pleasant. I don't go around eating straight caramel sauce though, so this is I'm glad that I went ahead and used all of this one, just so that way I can get that one done. It's not one that I would probably drink on its own a lot. Again, because it is a little bit reminiscent of just eating straight caramel sauce, and that's not something I do. So I do think you kind of get more used to it the more you drink of it, but yeah, be prepared for a very sweet caramel flavor. I do think if you added a tiny bit of cream and a little bit of sugar, you will absolutely capitalize on that caramel sauce idea, which take or leave, I definitely will not. But yeah, it is absolutely what it promises to be. So it does that. And I will say it's probably mid-road tea for me. Again, I will have my leaderboard here soon, so you'll see, but it's about middle of the pack for me right now. All right, that is day 13, and again, as I keep saying, I'll get all these things edited and dropped in one big grouping of videos, so I'll be caught up again soon, and I'll see you tomorrow.